made and controlled by doctrines, dogmas, and creeds. As a matter of fact, for those of you who are Bible students, the only definition the Bible gives of religion is what? Pure religion. And undefiled before God and the Father is what? Come on, you got to talk to me. What does the Bible define as pure religion? That you? Does it say anything about Ellen White there? Okay. Does it say anything about Sabbath keeping there? Does it say anything about tithes and offering there? Does it say anything about ingathering there? But are these important? But true religion to God has nothing to do with doctrines, dogmas, and creeds. It has everything to do with how you represent God to a world that is full of darkness, disease, and death. That's what true religion. And if you challenge me on this, you're going to lose. Because I read somewhere when the day of reckoning came about, and God was handing down the rewards for those who are light and those who represent darkness, he said unto those who received the scathing rebuke. Do you remember what they said? When did we see you hungry? When did we see you naked and didn't clothe you? When did we see you in prison and did not visit you? Did he ask anything about spirit of prophecy and Sabbath keeping? And tithes and offerings? Did you hear this? Now, I know this is going to mess with a few of you because you are so much into works. And you have been trained in an institution to think salvation by works. And so the more you give, the better you are. That's activity. The kingdom of heaven is about ontology. That's a state of being. That's why God never says do, but he always says be ye, be. Because your ontology determines your activity. Am I speaking to a dead church here today? Did you hear what I said? And he showed the prophet a valley of dry bones. And then you ask yourself, Paul, is this what God has called the church to do? To go into this dark, dry valley of life and to look around and to see the effects of sin in our world? How do you solve a problem if you do not know the nature of it? And I know there's some medical professionals in here. There is no way you can provide a prognosis for a disease if you have the wrong diagnosis. Am I right about it? So if you are serious about the ministry, I don't believe in programs. Programs are repetitious, and ministry, dynamic, intentional, aimed at providing a solution to problems that really exist. Did you hear what I say? And God took the prophet out on a quest and showed him a valley of dry bones. People are dead and dying. And the church of God has the remedy to correct the ills of the world. People are helpless and hopeless, and we have the power of God in the gospel that we preach. But you see, the problem is we preach about Christ, but we don't preach what Christ preached about. There's a difference. There was only one recorded sermon in all of the ministry of Christ. One sermon you ever heard him preach. And and homiletically, for those of us who are trained in the art of preaching, we wouldn't even call it a sermon. But there was one outing, that Sermon on the Mount. Do you remember the content of that sermon? Found in Matthew chapter 5? What do you call it? Talk to me. The what? The be. Was it the do or the be? The be attitudes. And do you notice how the be attitudes ended? It ended with Jesus telling the disciples, you are the salt of the earth. And then you ask yourself, what was the function of salt in the ancient world? Well, it was used as a preservative. Another way that salt was used, they didn't have septics back then. So when you had to do what we call back in the day number 2, you go and you put it in a pit in the back of your yard. And that's what would happen. You would go to the market back in the misrepresent the name of the Lord. So that if I'm dressed like a police officer and you're being attacked and you call me and say somebody's committing a crime, and say, hey, I only look the part, I'm not a. The moment you carry and represent the name of God, you have influence. The problem is you don't know the power you have. was stripped. We know, those of us who had our minds in tune with God knew what that was, because the Bible has already told us that and to destroy. Don't you think it was strange that not one religious organization in the world stood up against that? Do you see why I don't push religion? And a lot of the pastors with whom I spoke were upset with me because they thought you're being radical. Well, truth is only radical in an environment of lies. If you tell me I'm an ugly man and I'm really ugly and I hate you for it, it's because I don't accept my ugliness. And millions were allowed to die. It has already told you it won't stop you from getting an infection. It won't stop you from spreading it. What's the value? I'm not going down there yet, but what's the value? Now, as a scientist, I'm asking the question. And then I said, and so the church of God remains, let me not say the church of God, the religious bodies of the world remain silent. Proteins in their bodies proliferating and proliferating, and it's just a matter of time before that overwhelming response to inflammation takes you out. I know this.